All right. We'll get started on our SeedStar 4 monitor. My name is Margo Suiter. I work for Kibble. I don't necessarily run around these parts. I'm over on the west side of Minnesota, a little bit into South Dakota is where I mostly work. But here today to help you kind of walk through the SeedStar 4 monitor. Who's brand new to SeedStar 4 this year? A few of us? Okay, it'll be fun. First day is always rough. I don't care what you have. Sometimes the first day is just really rough, remembering everything. But this planner and this setup, comparable to the previous versions. I'll reference, back and forth, like we used to do this, now we do that. It is, once you get over okay, this is different, it is easier to pick up and more consistent. It feels more like phones and apps, and you'll hear me reference things as apps because it feels like that, or it's kind of how it's set up. So from the factory, SeedStar 4 planners come with default home pages, okay? There's 3 of them that the seating sets up. You have the ability to reconfigure them, adjust them how you want, not look at some if you don't want to. I like the one we're looking at right now, Planner Details. This is where I spend most of my time. The other 2 are called Summary, okay? And the other one is called Overview, okay? The reason I like details is I'm a big user of shortcuts. I set up a lot of shortcuts on my shortcut bar for myself, okay? So I can kind of stay on this page and monitor the things I want to do, and then if I want to change something, do something, I use my shortcuts down at the bottom, okay? And I'm going to walk through why I set up my shortcut bar this way and how to do that here quick. So you'll see one of the shortcuts I have at the bottom. When we get back to there's my guidance page, is the guidance app. So if I'm going to switch out an AB line, I'm just going to hit my shortcut for guidance, hit set track, go find my line, get her done. Also inside guidance, so this is your first time with the Gen 4, if you take the time, you import your lines in. Maybe you've got lines for all your headlands that you've been using RTK. If you take the time to put them in a set, okay, I'm in a different field than I was before. Take the time to put them in a set, and you create a new track set and put them in a set. Once you do that, then you can just swap through them. That's what the next shortcut is here on the bottom. I can swap through to the next one, okay? Now, this particular field I'm in right now had multiple lines. I'd recommend cleaning up your lines, and getting a good set together, and you can lay them in order, right? So if you're going to start on the east side of the field and do the north and then the west and then the south, you can put them in order and just swap through those lines, okay? Nice and quick and easy. The other thing I set up on the bottom of my shortcut bar are the 3 statuses for working, so documentation, making a map, auto track, and section control. Okay, so when I'm down in the field planting, these should all be lit up green. And that's my quick glance down at the bottom of my screen that everything is on and it's working, right? It sees seed, it's planting, it's making a map. Oh, yep, my auto track engaged, I'm good there. And my section control's on. It's gonna, shut off essentially when I get in and out of coverage. Okay, this on-off button here for section control, this is your master, right? This, 2630, remember your check mark when you wanted to turn off section control? Okay, we're not perfect. Sometimes we run out of seed. We need to replant over something. We want to ignore coverage, right? We've got to turn off your section control. This is the quick on-off for section control. You can back up, ignore that, put the planter back down and, replant where you're at, okay, if that's the case. So that's a quick on-off button. The other thing I do is put the SeedStar app, okay, on the shortcut bar. That lets us quickly get into everything related to the planner without thumbing through the 3 different home pages, right? I can boom, get in and do what I want to do. I use this particularly when we're starting in the field, because when you get into the SeedStar app, it'll let you do all the things you need to do to get started. We'll come back to this. And then lastly, I have a fast start button on here. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And then here's a remote PTO button. So the question came up, these planters are powered either with a PTO or they're powered with hydraulic through your Power Beyond. If you are PTO power generation, when you get your butt out of the seat, it's going to buzz at you from a safety perspective, it wants to turn off your PTO because you're getting out of the seat, okay? This button, if you tap it before you get up, it'll let you get up and everything's gonna stay on and stay running when you're getting out of the cab. It's remotely enabling your PTO to be out of the seat. If you forget, it does pop up a message and you can say, yep, keep it going, and tap it there too. You don't have to use this shortcut, but sometimes I like putting that one down there. The other one I put down here a lot, especially if you've got fertilizer and you're utilizing a rate controller, okay, not necessarily John Deere's exact rate, but a rate controller. Those all flow through the ISOBus VT, okay? A lot of times I put a shortcut to the ISOBus VT down here, so I have quick access to my rate controller as well. Okay, I don't have one on this planner, so I can't demonstrate that today, but so that's kind of the shortcut bar. If we hit the menu button and dive into, so this is your Gen 4 menu, okay, the long way, right, to all these apps. Machine settings is always gonna refer to all your tractor stuff, okay? Applications is always gonna get you into, think of that as your old Green Star menu in your 2630, right? You went into Green Star and you found all the things you were doing. And then system, that will get you to basically software updates and files, data, in importing and exporting data. So to change layouts, that's an AMS function. We'll go to applications, and then we'll go ahead and find the layout manager. And of course, you got your default run pages at the top. We can, you know, if you want to edit those pages, you sure can. Shortcuts. Hit that button, hit the pencil, and you got to make room. You got to get rid of something to add something. So if I wanted to get rid of this and add something back, it's just as simple as minusing it out, adding it back, and then I'll come back and put that button in there to show you what that would look like. And then we hit save. And that's how you edit a shortcut bar. Okay? So the other thing, I didn't talk about this much, but in the last group, but I will since we're here in guidance. So a lot of us have created lines over the years, and maybe they've A/B lined all their headlands, right? That's where you would use that set. If you don't have that, or you're looking for a little bit different option, in a Gen 4, if you have nice boundaries, good, reliable boundaries that you've driven, okay? With SF3 or RTK, there is a new feature, and it's really, really nice. Like we asked for it for a long time on 2630s, called boundary fill. So when you're under the set track menu, so of course I don't think I have a boundary in this monitor, but when you're under the set track menu and you go to the new track area, you'll see this boundary track option and boundary fill. Essentially what it does is the boundary that you have loaded in your screen for that field, if you've got a 60-foot planter, it's going to build an AB line 30 feet off of it. And it's going to mirror the exact boundary. And there is no swapping AB lines at that point. You're just going to drive and you're going to get to your corner and stop and turn and back up and put your planter back down and resume it, okay? And use it in that manner. So that's a nice feature. Maybe a reason to consider getting good boundaries done this year if you've been ignoring it or not doing it. In the past, we've been pretty hesitant about boundaries because if you didn't have a good one, it did fool with your section control and your shutoffs. We have ability now in section control to disable boundaries if they are bad. And the other thing it does, if you have a nice boundary, you'll learn in the Operations Center class over here that it gives you a lot of visuals that you didn't have before, in the app, where you can see that this is a quarter and I've got 100 acres of it done and the statuses of it that way. Okay, so let's get into the planter monitor. We're going to kind of just talk through getting ready to go. So before we go to every field, work setup. This is where we're going to choose the client farm field we're in, and this is also where we're going to fill out our varieties, crop we're in, variety that we're planting, and whether or not we're using a controller rate, so a flat rate from that planter, or a prescription. So if you're going to swap out to a prescription, let me back up. Let's start. We'll go this side to that side. Location, okay. Don't leave it dashed. Pick a real client farm field, okay. So you want to make sure it's filled out and you're documenting to the right field. Hopefully you've cleaned up all your data and you've pushed in a good, nice farm field list to the monitor, and you're picking and choosing what you had from the Operations Center, okay. The next piece of this is equipment. So this is your equipment profile. So if you remember in the 2630, G, H, and I, right? G is where you went and did your client farm field. H is where you did all your equipment setup. I is where you did your documentation. It's all in one app now under the equipment profile. Honestly, during our pre-delivery setup, we should be measuring these things out, double checking it. If you're on year number 2 and you've done any sort of resets, if you've done any sort of it's always good to come back in here the next year and double check that things look reasonable. So under the tractor profile, you'll have GPS offsets that you want to verify. Those would be, I mean, nothing's really changed here, same principles. Receiver to the rear axle is your inline offset. Also would like to know your GPS height. You can punch that in. Connection offsets, pretty critical. That if you're using a drawbar type planner, that number is accurate from your axle to your drawbar connection, or in this example, axle to your 3-point connection on this planner. Okay, you just tap in there. It does give you additional explanation if you come in and where you should be measuring from. It's all in the monitor to kind of keep you straight there. Okay, now this is probably one that I've seen get messed up a little bit. We might have a 1770 planner like this, and for some reason we punch in on the wrong type of connection point. Remember, there was different numbers for your drawbar measurement than there was for your 2-point measurement. So just make sure you're on the right one, because it's going to use the right numbers from the tractor profile in this aspect. So this is a 1770. We're a 3-point connection. It's going to use the right numbers. It's pivoting. Okay, that's that pivot pin that sits. You can kind of where that bulkhead for all those hydraulics are. That pivot pin that sits there. A truly mounted planner would be non-pivoting. I don't think we have a lot of those kicking around. And then there's a measurement, of course, from your 2-point to your pivot that they want you to make. As we move through this, center of rotation, that's the measurement from your connection point to your frame wheels. That would be one to check out. That one's important for how coverage maps get mapped, how the planner trails. Things like AutoPath, if we're adding implement receivers to the machines, and then work point. Work point is essentially what I call where the action happens, so where the seed's falling, right? So we're going to measure from the connection point to our brush belt on our seed tubes in this area. So about the middle of the gauge wheel is where we're going to measure to. Okay. Mechanical delay, I don't want you touching that here, okay? Like this is tied to section control, but any adjusting we're going to do for section control will be done under the section control app, okay? I will say this, these numbers should typically be very low, okay? These are very responsive planners, they're electric drive. Seed is primed all the way to basically the bottom of the seed trench in that brush belt, right? So there is not a lot of delay. If you see these numbers larger than that, you probably have a measurement off. Or if you have to move it more than this, you got a measurement off. We need to go back to the beginning from a troubleshooting perspective. If you're going to add an implement receiver, you guys are getting the bonus round. I forgot this in the first group. So, but if you're going to add an implement receiver, this is where you add that profile underneath the implement. Of course, measurements for basically the connection to point to where it's mounted in line. Okay, typically they get put in on this planner. A new one for the factory. You see that mast on the right-hand side of the planner there? That's to accept a receiver. So you can measure to the inline distance, and that one's offset center. So you'd have 2 numbers to put in here. It does detect the serial number of the receiver when you plug it in. So it should know it's there, and it should save to that receiver's profile. So if you're making those measurements, that's where that's at. As well as if for implement receivers, once we get done here, we do have to go one other place to make measurements on those, and that would be, see, I gotta get all the way out of this and jump into my actual receiver profile. And then under the setup tab here, there's some fore aft measurements and a height that we need to fill out for the implement receiver. Of course, all I have right now is a machine online, so that's grayed out, but in an implement receiver setup, this would not be grayed out, and there's a measurement you need to make there.
And the height is when the planner is down?
Yes, the height is when the planner is down, yes. And when you're measuring control points and things like that, those frame wheels swing forward or back. On this one, they swing back. On a DB, they swing forward. So definitely want them down for those measurements, okay? Also new on a Gen 4 when it comes to calibrating receivers. I will go into, so you can get, so we're used to coming in here under the Starfire, right? And then under setup, this TCM calibration that's down here. On a Gen 4 monitor and a 6000 receiver, the new recommendation for TCM calibrations is now found under the Starfire menu, so it's a little bit different. We go under the menu, once again under applications, and go find Starfire. There it is. Okay, you see this advanced TCM calibration at the bottom? This is a driving calibration. So in the past, we would park our tractor north, right? And then we would hit the button, and then we'd put our turn around and go face south and put our axle in the exact same spot. And it was, you know, kind of calibrating how the receiver sits on the machine, side to side, fore aft. Yeah. Okay, this one is a driving calibration. Interactive calibration is what is preferred. You could do the other way first and then come back and do this one to get more precise. And this would be what I would want you to do if you're going to put a receiver on the planner for implement guidance or autopath. This is recommended. Okay, you essentially need an open area. So if it's snowed up and crappy in your yard, you're not going to do this until things dry up a little bit. But you need 300 feet at a minimum. You're going to drive and basically set an A and a B point, go in one direction. You're going to turn around and then hit resume, and it's going to auto track from that B to A. And the whole time it's kind of calibrating how that implement receiver is working. Both receivers, the machine receiver and the implement receiver, to get that zeroed out, the TCM zeroed out. Okay, so this is what's preferred when you're using those advanced automation type functions. Everything's set up from a work setup perspective. Now I can hop into my SeedStar app. I'm in the field. First things first, I got to unfold. So that's why I put the SeedStar app in my shortcut. And I have quick access right here to everything I'm going to need. I can unfold my planner with the frame control button, turn on my EPG, get my vacuum set, prime my meters, fill my meters up, all in one button press. Okay. So first things first, frame control, no switch boxes, but it works the same way. Okay. We're going to pretend we're in transport mode. So to fold, unfold, you'll be in transport mode up here at the top. You have two options here. We have manual control. So in manual control, you're just going to activate whatever function you want to do. So that's like your switch, right? And then you use your SCV to make it go. Okay. So, you know, if we're going to unfold this planner, we might want to drop our wing wheels down, right? Now I'm going to run my SCV, and that's going to push them down. When I'm done with that, I can stop, hit my wing fold, and run my SCV. It's going to unfold the planner. Okay. So it's very simple. DB planners, you have two SCVs that get involved because you've got the drawbar up and down and your translift and all that fun stuff. So easy fold is an option. We can program that in. It works really well with John Deere planner frames. DB planner frames, if you get over 60 feet, it's a little tougher to get programmed in and dialed in nice. But with one button press, you basically enable it, and with one button press, it does everything in order for you, and you just hold your SCV until it's done. Okay. So that's fold and unfold. When you're done, make sure you get it back into plant mode so we can go plant and have the functions that we need. This is a 16-row planner. If you have a 24-row planner or a little larger, if you took the frame weight distribution option, there's an extra button here at the bottom of this screen to enable that. Okay, so frame weight is the extra cylinders on the planner frame to push weight from middle to out. It's just an on-off button here on the back of the frame to the right side of the planner, I believe. There's a gauge, and that's where you increase or decrease your pressure there for the frame weight distribution. Okay. All right, so that's everything inside the frame. Now we're ready to probably turn on our EPG. Okay, before I turn on my EPG first, I'm gonna have to flip my PTO switch on, right? That's how I'm powered. So PTO on, EPG on, so now I got power to all my drives, my meters, my motors. And kick on my SCVs for my vacuum. Okay, these are all capable, as long as you're plumbed into the backside of a John Deere tractor and all the vacuums are independent, okay? And you're in and out through each SCV. these are capable of vacuum automation. So instead of monkeying with 3, 4, 5 gallons of flow, okay, on your hydraulic controls, you can come in here and just say, hey, I need 18 inches of vacuum pressure as a target. Flip your SCV into continuous. It's going to find it. It's going to find the flow it needs, okay? So that's a nice feature. You can do them each vacuum motor separate. You can use a common target if you so desire. Of course, once you get things on, make sure you fill your meter. To get, a vacuum doesn't really get accurate until you fill your meter. So that would be your next step on this page, is to fill that meter. There's also a purge button here. So meter fill turns both the motor for the meter and the motor for the brush belt to fill everything up. Purge will just spin out what's in the brush belt, right? So they recommend purging that brush belt at the end of the day, or if it's going to sit at any given amount of time, if there's any seed kind of getting a memory in those brushes. So everything you need right here. Under the target rate over here, this is where you flip in and out for flat rates. Of course, under work setup, if you chose a prescription, you would have seen that down here. You can also, a lot of times in this display, you go in one way, you can come out or go in a different way. It gets you to the same spot, I guess. So this will get me back to where I was to go find a prescription if I had one that I've uploaded. There's none in this monitor, So question was on, how do I get my prescriptions in here? Can I send them wirelessly or can I upload them with USB? Both are capable. So depending on which method you choose, so this is probably a pre-season activity, right? Menu, so maybe you got them from an agronomist on a stick. You can actually partner with your agronomist and he can put them in your op center and transfer them straight to your machines as well. But if we go under System and File Manager, okay, 2 options, right? USB drive or from received files. So when we send them over the air with JD Link, they're going to be sitting in this received files bucket. If you insert a stick, you'll have that option to bring them in here. So and it's as simple as choosing your option, hitting next, and hopefully, so we sent one here. This one's been sent one over the air before. And then you hit next, and then it gives you basically a list of everything that's in the file, okay? And you even have options here to pick and choose if you want to put it all on or part of it on. Understand that on a Gen 4, when we send setup data, like batch send setup data with a setup file, it's going to add to the data the setup data that's already on the machine. So 2630 was very different. Your setup file would overwrite the previous stuff. This one adds 2. Okay. So the last piece of data that got sent to this was probably for a combine, right? Variety locator file and some setup information. That's how you bring them in. Chris will also talk to you regarding Work Planner. So with the Gen 4, you can skip all this step. With the Work Planner, it automatically imports. So when we use a batch setup file like we've always done in the past with the setup file creator, it's you gotta come in here and go to your file manager, find it, import it in. With a work plan, he'll talk about that. That'll when you shoot it over the air through Op Center, it hits the machine, it's auto imported. So when you pick the field, you just pick the plan and it's waiting for you. Okay, so I said my favorite page is details. The reason it's my favorite is I get all my monitors at the top plus population at the bottom. We always want to keep an eye on population. But of course with SeedStar 4, we get the ability to monitor and adjust downforce, singulation spacing. If you have air adjust row cleaner option, this planner doesn't, but if you had air adjust row cleaners, you'd have the ability to control those here. You'd also, if you have pneumatic closing wheels, you could control all this right here from this one screen. If you start here with the tiles, it's kind of the 4 monitors that I can look at with the addition of population. I can tap into any of them, and then those tiles that you saw become tabs at the top, okay? So I still have population here. This is where I potentially could swap out my rate, change my rate quick. This is my downforce monitor. Then of course I have singulation, so doubles and skips monitored here, and then spacing is monitored here on the last tab, okay? So I'm gonna go to downforce because typically Of course, I got a map view here, and I know we're all used to a little bit bigger map view, but if I need to see it a little bit bigger, I can always pop in, pop out. If you got a little extra screen space, you can always put that on a different screen somewhere too. And even down here in the right-hand corner, I have the ability to quickly change downforce margin and those sort of things as well. So this is the downforce monitor. If I tap where it says margin, first things first, when you're operating downforce, when we're getting started in the field, I'm going to ask you to make sure you're in active downforce mode. There are two modes. Active means right away we're going to punch in a target margin. So basically margin, the way I think of it is on every one of these rows, because it's an individual row, we have a sensor. And that sensor sits on the gauge wheel stop. So when when we lower the planter down and it hits that stop, right, for our depth, there's a sensor there that's kind of measuring the load, right? So how much force, based on the pressure in our system, how much force is is that sensor feeling back from the soil or the field condition, okay? So that's your sensor, okay? It operates off of a target margin, okay? These planters, 85 to 115 in conventional till is kind of where 125 maybe was where kind of John Deere says to start. So that's kind of a range. So 100 is not a bad place to start for target margin, okay? It's just a range and a place to start, okay? You really, until you start planting, have no idea how much pounds of downforce it's going to use to create that margin, right? Because that's the guide for the sensor. But I'd like to see you turn it on and operate in that mode. There is a second mode. You can turn it off. Okay, and now we're in set point mode, and understand here, we're not really looking at the margin at all. We're not setting any target for that sensor. We're just saying, hey, I want 150 pounds of hydraulic force on that row unit, and that's it. And I just want to go plant. Nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to be automatic. It's just going to hold 150 pounds, okay? And there might be a scenario where you want that, but hopefully you bought this for a reason. And you want it to, react and use it throughout the field. So we're going to have it on. Make sure you got a target margin in there. We're going to put the planter down. We're going to go ahead and go plant. First things first, the second half, this is two monitors in one. So you got your margin, so how the system is reacting. So your target is the middle line, 100 pounds. And then, depending on how much or less margin it sees, that's going to be your bars up and below that center bar. And then on the bottom half, you've got two options here. One that says ground contact and one that says downforce, okay? I like to start with ground contact to have a quick glance at that to make sure I have enough downforce to have good ground contact, right? If I don't have enough downforce to have consistent 99, 100% ground contact, I don't have enough, right? So that's my first gut check that, okay, I've got enough margin in the system as I get going to have good ground contact, okay? Then I flip over and I take a look at pounds. So this is my second gut check, all right? Prior to all these automated systems, we would just put it in a spring position and we'd have X pounds of downforce, or you had a gauge in your cab and you had X pounds of downforce. That's what we're seeing on the bottom half. So we can put up to 400 pounds of downforce into our system on any given row, okay? So based on whatever margin, that bottom graph is showing you how many pounds we're actually using to get that margin, okay? So if I've got 100 pounds of margin in there and I only see like 60 pounds of downforce, I might feel a little panicked by that. That doesn't feel like much. Maybe I need a little more, okay? Or if I got 100 pounds of downforce and I'm for some reason using 200 pounds of actual force, that might not feel good either. I might feel like a lot, okay? So that's my gut check for where I've been in the past. It's just a gut check. You got to get out and actually do a ground check, right? So, get your headlands planted, get going in consistent field conditions, get out, take a look. I'll even take the pressure off of a closing wheel and strap up that closing wheel when I'm getting started. So I have a good, nice view of the seed trench not getting closed, right? Take a look at that seed trench. Make sure, you got to check your depth, right? So make sure your seed's at the bottom of that trench, okay? If it's not making it to the bottom because it's falling apart, indicator of not enough, okay? Need more margin. If it's at the bottom of that trench, the next thing I kind of look at is just the condition of the sidewall. If it looks overdone, okay, if I could put my pocket knife in it and it's really hard to peel out, it's probably overdone, doesn't feel good that way. No reason to run extra, right? A, agronomic effects, B, wear and tear, back off your margin, okay? It's as simple as that. It's just a relative number, and then your gut check is the actual pounds of downforce that you see on the system, okay? You want to do this in the most consistent part of the field, how the 90% of the field is. Don't be doing it in the 10% that's the mucky, wet stuff, right? The system has, so then once you get it all dialed in, okay, then you'll start noticing as you travel through the field and you hit those spots of the field that are a little bit different. Maybe you get yourself into some grain cart tracks or something, and those 2 rows need more downforce, right? And you'll see those react and individually react versus the whole rest of the planner. Questions on downforce and getting it set? It really is, I mean, I think we tend to maybe overthink it a little bit sometimes. It's really very simple. We just need to take a look at the condition of the seed trench. And of course, 9 years out of 10, we're dealing with moisture around here, and downforce isn't what creates compaction. It's the combination of downforce and moisture that creates compaction. And we can't control moisture sometimes, but we can control this. So unless we want to wait a few days, then we can control it. All right, so the next tab over, we talked about singulation. That's pretty straightforward, kind of mirrors population. Spacing, I like to look at seed spacing, this monitor. This is kind of an indicator of how the whole system's working in my head, as far as how the seed bed worked up and how the planter's rolling through the field. If your CV, so population, space, and singulation should be really tight, right? These planters should be able to singulate very tight, and spacing should be pretty tight too. You should definitely have a bar that is no higher than halfway up, okay? If you do, and everything's singulating good at the meter, more than likely that's more of a, things just didn't work up like it is, or maybe I need to slow down a half mile an hour or an hour, a mile an hour, and let that thing steady up a little bit. It's kind of how I use the seed spacing monitor. They tell us anything over 0.3 coefficient variation. So coefficient variation, if our seeds are supposed to be 6 inches apart based on our population, when we start getting 0.3 CV, so now that seed's at 8, or maybe that seed's at 4, okay, when we start getting beyond those limits, that's when it starts to maybe impact yield at that point, okay? So you can't have some coefficient variation without any impact to yield. It's when you get too much. So if you got really big bars here, you got a problem, right? They should be short little bars. Okay. So if you're having troubles with population or on a certain row, I like to draw out, I just tap the 3 dots button. So we do give you the ability to monitor RPM and torque on both the motors. So the meter motor and the brush belt motor. I'll just pop into, so if you've got a row that's singulating poorly, okay, and you don't know where or why my problem is, this will tell you. Because if that row is off on the meter side, it's probably, I didn't get the bowl in tight, I didn't get hub tension right, or I've got something wrong, physically inside the meter. If you see it off relative to the others from a belt perspective, then it's on the bottom side. All those brush belts have a tensioner in them. If you didn't tighten it all the way and get it snapped in, that would potentially cause an issue there too. So kind of lets you know pretty quick when you're going to get out which end of it you're going to be working on. The only other thing I'll probably draw out or show you guys quick is if you go into, let's see, the SeedStar app, back to troubleshooting, okay? Or getting ready in the yard. If you go under the SeedStar app and then click on procedures and then hit runoff procedures, these all come with a server on it that gives us a Wi-Fi capability. So before the session, I connected my phone to the Wi-Fi on the planner. Okay, and if I want to run off a row, and say I'm having trouble with row, 4, I can come in here and say, hey, I want to run it off at 30,000. I want to pretend like I'm going 7, okay? And then it will run, this planner is a test stand, right? We don't have to take anything off, put it on test stand anymore. But you can start that right here from the cab. So if you got somebody helping you, great. I can start it and somebody can watch and maybe look at it. If you don't have anybody helping you and you're alone, you can basically configure it and then hit this mobile button right next to it once you connect your phone, and then it switches over to your app, and then you can walk back here and then start and stop it through your app on your phone. Okay, so it's a nice feature. It's also nice you can essentially also like run off the whole planner in the yard if you want to look at all of that. And we do that here at the shop. We'll run off the whole planner in one shot. That's where we get that, you know, we get to look at all the rows, and, you know, if they're all kind of together, or if you got some outliers, the ones that are outliers typically show us that we need to adjust hub tension or make an adjustment in them to get them all consistent.